Our guest speaker tonight is Ted Barrett. He became a Major League umpire in 1994, and he was umpire for almost 30 years. If somebody... Okay, so I met Ted in 2016 after a Hillsborough Hops game. He was there because his son Andrew was umpire that game, and I was a stat stringer for the MLB Game Day app at the time. And after the game, I went downstairs and I saw Jack and Mary Kane. Jack's supposed to be on this call. I hope he makes it. So Jack asked me, "Hey, you ever met Ted Barrett?" And I said, "No, I haven't." So he introduced us, and the timing was interesting because just about 3 or 4 days before this introduction, I took on the assignment of coming up with the evolution of umpires equipment uniform, SABR book of umpires and umpiring, which you see right here. And so Ted started to tell me about his blue or whatever that, how it's pronounced, chest protector. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. He had the same chest protector since about 1992. And so he told me all about that. I thought that was cool. So I went home and I emailed Bill Nowlin, who's the editor of the book and who's also on this call tonight. I said, "Hey, this is pretty timely. After I just took on this assignment of umpires equipment uniform, I just met Ted Barrett and we were discussing his blue chest protector." Okay, well, I did not know at the time, but about 2 weeks later, Ted and his umpiring crew were interviewed by Bill at Fenway Park, and they discussed that. So in this book, there's a whole page talking about Ted's blue chest protector. So then what was interesting is that following March, this book came out. 4 days, or no, just a couple weeks later, opening day of baseball. So the late game on ESPN was the Angels, California Angels, or whatever they were called at the time. And here's Ted umping behind the plate wearing a, what's it called, the plate coat or whatever, that suit coat type of thing, which shows a lot of your blue chest protector. So I hopped on email, "Hey, Bill, you watch an Angels game?" I said, "Yes." "You see Ted's chest protector?" "Sure do." So I wonder how many people know the story behind that thing. That book just came out. We thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so besides umpiring, oh yeah, Ted has worked 12 division series, 10 championship series, 5 World Series, and was the umpire for 2 perfect games, Matt Cain and David Cohn. And besides his umpiring life, years ago, he was sparring partner for 7 world champion boxers. That should have been interesting. And also, he is a reverend. He went to Trinity Theological School, or whatever it's called, in Indiana, and became a reverend. And all this is in the book of Umpires and Umpiring. Bill Nowlin wrote his biography that's in the book. So there's at least 3 things that have to do with Ted in the SABR book of Umpires and Umpiring. It's the SABR biography, the discussion on his blue chest protector, and also the interview with him and his umpiring crew. So if you want to look at that book again, that would be good. Okay, well, I think that's all I have to say. So I would like to introduce the Reverend Dr. Crew Chief Ted Barrett. I think you're on mute. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah. With all my education, I'm terrible with technology. So thanks for that introduction, Bob. I appreciate it. Great to be on with you guys. And yeah, that was, I remember it was like yesterday when I met you, and the Carlucci chest protector is kind of legendary among umpires. And I was so very interested, and I was glad that you asked me about it, and I could give you the background and the information on it. Yeah, meeting Bill in Fenway Park and him interviewing us and him writing a nice piece about umpires, and I really enjoyed the book, and I think he represented us well. And Bill's become, I consider him a good friend. Was always stopping by the locker room in Boston. So see some new faces. If I haven't met you, nice to meet you. If I have, good to see you again. Yeah, I just retired after 34 years in professional baseball. I went to umpire school in 1989. I went to the Joe Brinkman umpire school, and Jeff Nelson and I were classmates, and we were the two people that made it to the big leagues out of that class. And as I look back on it, it seems it was a great ride. It was a great career, and with a lot of fun. And like you said, a lot of cool things happened, a lot of notable games. As you mentioned, I'm the only umpire to have 2 perfect games behind the plate, which I feel like I caught lightning in a bottle twice. But I'm the only umpire, and I believe maybe the only person to actually be on the field for 3 perfect games. I think Joe Maddon's been in the dugout for 3 perfect games, but I think I'm the only one to be on the field for 3 perfect games. And then I think in addition to that, 4 additional no-hitters I've been on the field for, including another one behind the plate. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, the World Series and the All-Star games and the Division Series and wild cards, lots of great memories. And I had just over 3,400 games, which, thanks to you guys who keep track of things like that, we're able to, that's kind of our milestones as umpires. We celebrate that. Getting 3,000 games is quite a feat nowadays with replay, which we don't get credit for, and with vacations. No one will break Joe West's record ever, I believe. Someone going to umpire school as a young man, I think, would have to work here at about 95 to break Joe's record. So that's not going to happen. And 3,000 games is going to be quite a benchmark. Right now, Angel Hernandez has the most games among active umpires, but he's out with an injury right now. I was rooting for Angel to get to 4,000, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't think we're going to have anybody ever reach 4,000 games again. But be that as it may, we love keeping track of our games and seeing who works more than the other guy. And yeah, I feel fortunate that I never missed a game due to injury, which was a pretty phenomenal thing to happen. And I've got hit by a lot of balls, baseballs, foul balls in the mask, different parts of the body. Just luckily, I always had a pretty good protection over the bones. Got a lot of bumps and bruises, but no broken bones. And after getting punched by the likes of George Foreman and some of the others, foul tips really weren't that bad. So, yeah, that's I'll throw it up to some questions and answers, but I'll give my background a little bit of how I got started in umpiring. I played youth football, and my dad told me that if I was playing a sport, I didn't have to get a job. So any sport that they were taking signups for, I signed up because I thought it would be better than working. And I was playing football was my main game, but I had a friend we were 14 years old, and he asked if I wanted to go with him to umpire a baseball game. They were looking for volunteers for the Little League, so I went. And umpiring is one of those things where you either love it or you hate it. And I loved it. It was fun, but I was busy playing sports. So eventually, after playing football, basketball, and baseball in high school, I would umpire some Little League games for some money. But when I got into college, my dad said, "Look, I know I told you didn't have to get a job, but you're killing me now with gas and car insurance and repairs." And he said, "So you got to get a job." So I said, "Well, you know what? I wonder if I could start umpiring higher levels of baseball than Little League." So I got into a group that was assigning high school games. And this was the mid 80s, and I was making $57 a game. And I was working 3 or 4 games a week. And I thought, this is awesome. My friends are, working at fast food places and working in retail and things like that. And I'm outside umpiring the great game of baseball, having fun. And I was working with a guy who was in the minor leagues at the time. And he said, "You really should go to umpire school and give this a shot, because I think you get a job in the minor leagues." at the time I was boxing, like Bob mentioned, I was sparring, and I had a decent amateur career, but not so good as a professional. So about the best thing I could do is take a punch. And so my dad said, "Hey, if you want to go to umpire school, I'll pay for it." And I thought, wow, 5 weeks in Florida. I like umpiring. It'll be a nice vacation. I could always come back to getting punched, being a punching bag when I'm done. But I went and I got a job, and I was sent to spring training in Arizona, and worked down here. I worked the Northwest League, 2 years in the Cal League, and I was down here for instructional league. And my wife and I were living in the Bay Area with our oldest son, and we decided to move to Arizona in 1991, and we've been here ever since. Progressed through, worked the Texas League, and I discovered what a huge state Texas is, because El Paso was in the league, and Jackson, Mississippi, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wichita, Kansas. Matter of fact, there was a whole lot of teams that weren't in Texas in the Texas League, and I got to AAA in the Pacific Coast League back then when there were 3 leagues. There was 10 teams, and so Tucson and Phoenix were close to home, and Vegas was drivable. So it was leaving home opening day and trying to see the family when we could. And then in 1994, I was doing a game in Tucson, Arizona, and I got the call to go to Texas, to Arlington, and work my first game in the big leagues. And I stayed up that whole season until the strike hit in August. And then I went back to AAA. From that point, I went up and down until I was hired full-time in 1999, and I got some back time, credit for some back time at that point. And I worked all the way up till the end of last year. And I think I had 26 or 27 years toward the pension. And so this is April, and I'm not on the field. And so it seems a little strange, but it's the same thing that happened during COVID, I think, which kind of prepared me for life away from baseball. And decided to retire last year. And anyway, I'll shut up. I'm rambling. I'm open up to any questions you guys have. I'm happy to talk about anything in my life.
Well, I have a question. You were umpiring when the switch was made between National League, American League, and Major League. Was that a problem? Did that affect you in any way?
Yeah, it was an adjustment. One thing is I was number 12 in the American League. I was given it. Terry Cooney had retired, and I got his number. But when the leagues came together, the National League had their numbers for their umpires. The American League had their numbers. Well, Jerry Davis had a lot more seniority than me, since seniority won. So I had to take a new number. And so I took number 65, which I joke because I took it because it was the year I was born. And there were several of us. Alfonso Marquez became number 72. Lance Barksdale was 63. Or Laz Diaz was 63. Lance Barksdale was 67. So we would joke that there was a lot of guys that took the numbers from the years they were born, including Bruce Fremming, who was number 6. And so Bruce didn't like it when I told that story, but I would tell it anytime I had the chance. So, but other than that, it was interesting because now we went to every stadium as opposed to just our American League ballparks. So the advantage was getting to every park during the season, or at least getting close to every park. There's always a couple cities that you miss. But the disadvantage was, we would go to certain cities like Baltimore or of course, New York and LA and the Bay Area. They all have, multiple teams. But, say a city like Baltimore or, Tampa or somewhere where during the course of a normal season, when the leagues were separated, we get there 5 or 6 times. And then when the switch was made, you'd be lucky to get somewhere twice. Usually it was once every city. So living in Phoenix was good because, being in the American League, I wasn't getting home. So at least now I got to get home other than spring training. But there was this rivalry, we always, who had the better stadiums, who had the better locker rooms, who had the better restaurants, who had the better watering holes. All this National League, they thought that they had everything. They thought that their staff was better, their office personnel were better, their hotels were better. But we're able to show them that we had some pretty good pretty good locker rooms too, and pretty good clubhouse guys. So, and now I don't know if there's too many guys left that worked under the old system. There's probably a few, but for the most part, everybody in the major leagues now had worked under just the one office.
I can read a couple questions here from the chat.
Okay.
This is from Rod Nelson. With regard to David Cohn's perfecto, knowing that both Don Larson and Yogi Berra were in attendance, and just how magic another perfecto would be, and being a man of faith, were you in direct communication with the baseball gods, and between what innings did you check in?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you know, there was definitely something spiritual going on there. If you think about it, and you remember Yogi Berra him and Steinbrenner had been feuding, and it was Yogi's first time back at the stadium. And so there was it was a cool vibe at the beginning, and then Larson threw out the first pitch and Yogi caught the first pitch. And then, I mean, it was Joe Torre's birthday and everybody was kind of in a good mood. And if you remember, after the third inning, we had a rain delay and Jim Evans was the crew chief. He pulled the tarp. And I remember walking into the locker room as we waited out the rain. And I said, "Hey, Chief, you can't do this. He's got a perfect game going." Just kind of joking around. And, you know, as it turns out, we came back out. They got the field ready, and there was Cohn back out there getting ready to throw again. And I mean, I don't know how many times that's happened since, but you'd be hard pressed to find now a starter go 3 innings, get shut down for a little while, and come back out. And some of the plays that were made, if you think Knobloch they were throwing sandbags over by first base because he could not throw a ball to first base and get it out, if you remember that year. And he went into the hole and made a play and threw an absolute bullet to nip a guy at first. O'Neill with a sliding catch early on. You know, he took a chance by diving and made the catch. And Ricky Leday lost the ball in the sun that kind of bounced off his wrist and took a nice, luckily bounced up where he can catch it. So, yeah, I think there was something magical going on there. Joe Girardi, I remember, made a great play as he ran over against the dugout and made a catch. And at one point, there was a foul tip back into his glove. He caught it for the third strike, threw the ball around. He turned around and he said, "I've never actually been able to physically see the ball go from the bat to my glove." And he said, "There's something special going on today." And of course, he was right.
Bob, I can read other things from the chat, but I'll let you call on me. Shall I read some other things from the chat? Okay, I will read some other things from the chat. Okay, this is from Brendan Jones. What's the craziest thing you have seen a manager do after you tossed him out of the game?
All right, I've got this story from Jim Tracy was managing the Dodgers at the time, and Paul LaDuca was catching. I had to play at the plate. Remember, this is before replay. This wouldn't happen today. But I had played at the plate, called the guy safe, and LaDuca was upset. And he was kind of hopping around, and I, told him to settle down or he'd be ejected. And so he did, and the game continued on. And there was another play at the plate, and I called the guy safe again. And right away, Tracy come firing out of the dugout, and he said, "From where I'm sitting in the dugout, I can see very clearly that you got that play right. And the last one too." He said, "But I've got to get out here. You're going to eject my catcher." So I said, "All right, Jim." And Jim was a very nice guy, professional guy. So he threw his hat on the ground. I ejected him. And as he turned to leave, he went to kick the chalk of the third baseline onto my pants. And he hit the ground hard, and I heard him say, "Ouch." And it was just kind of a complete fail. And he limped back to the dugout. And so the next day he comes out to home plate limping, and he said, "Well, it serves me right, trying to kick chalk on you. I broke my toe." So, and I said, "Well, that's what you get for trying to kick chalk on me. Come on, I would have had to get my pants dry cleaned." But yeah, Jim was a wonderful guy, and that was funny. Another time was Joe Madden had a situation where I was working the plate, and I went to third base on a check swing, and so I didn't think the guy did, and the third base umpire agreed with me. And Joe Madden was managing Tampa at the time. We were in Colorado for an interleague game, and it was Father's Day. I remember because I have the picture, and I know we were wearing blue wristbands. And I came out, and he was complaining that we didn't call the check swing, and he was yelling at my third base ump. And so I told him this to stop, and finally he wasn't letting it go. And I said, all right, look, Joe, that's it. Let's go. Let's get back to the dugouts, play the game. If you say another word, you're done. He said, I love you. And so I ejected him. So he's probably the only guy ever to get ejected for saying I love you. Yeah. And but we got a good laugh out of that later. At the time, he wasn't so happy, but we got a good laugh out of that.
Ted, wanted to say hi from Boston. I did a quick calculation. If you were working this year and working 26 minutes less per game and worked 120 games, you'd be working 52 hours less during the course.
Yeah,
of
it looks like I picked the wrong year to retire. Huh?
Yeah, we're gonna miss you here though.
Well, I appreciate that. I gotta make a trip out maybe and sit with you for a game. I think that'd be fun. I always said when I retired, I'd come watch a game at Fenway because after being on the field so many times and looking out at the fans in the stands, looks like they were having fun. So that might be a fun trip. But yeah, it is. It's going to be a lot better for the guys. But I've noticed in talking to them, it's very intense.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, the guys walking off the field say it's like they just ran a sprint. Where instead of doing a marathon now they're doing a 5K, but it's trying to be as fast as they can. So, I'll leave that to the younger generation. Good to see you, Bill.
Ted, I was talking to Dale Scott a couple of time ago, and he tells several stories about players or managers coming out to talk to the umpire and pretending to argue or showing in their body language or something like that they're really pissed off, but essentially saying, now I've got to come out here and argue with you, even though I know you were right on the call, but I've got to protect my catcher. I've got to do this. See what I've got to do this. I know the runner was out of the lane. I know that he should have been out, but now I've got to come out and bark at you. You have a lot of experiences like that where that somebody came out and kind of put on a show where they really weren't. And did they really ever ask you to kick them out?
Yeah, absolutely. And that happened quite a bit. The managers want the players to know that they're defending them, but they also want to have a good relationship with us. And so the good guys, they don't want to be unfair. They want to let you know that they're doing what they have to do. But they also know they have to work with us the next day. So, and a lot of them are just, good people, and they know they don't want to be unfair to you. So, I remember Terry Collins was managing Anaheim, and he came out and, he just started yelling and screaming, saying that, said, this is terrible. My bullpen can't get anybody out. My starters can't go 5 innings. My third base coach wants to be the manager, and, my wife's mad at me. And, I felt like pulling out a little couch chair and asking him to sit down, and I could do a little counseling. But I just sat there and listened. And at one point he said something that really struck me as funny, and I started laughing, and he got up in my face and said, put his finger up, said, don't you laugh. Don't you laugh. If you laugh, they'll know what I'm doing here. So don't laugh. And so I didn't. I just kind of gave him the stone face and, ejected him, and he went on his way and even thanked me as he left. So, those type of things happen all the time. And even when they did it, especially the older guys like Lou Piniella, Bobby Cox, when you ejected them, it was, even though they were mad at the time, their face turning red, their veins popping, they'd leave and, they'd either, send word over after the game or, send a bottle of wine to dinner. Or at least if you saw them the next day, it was hello, away from the dugout, or they'd bring the lineup cards out and act like nothing happened, like it was another day. Very professional, very, this is a job, matter of fact, this is not personal. And, we always respected that. I listened to the old timers talk about Billy Martin, and they really respected him, even as much as he got on them, and even as much as they had their run-ins. They respected Billy. They didn't respect Earl so much. Earl Weaver, they thought he took things way too far and took them personally, and came out to be spiteful. Those are the stories that I heard. I can't confirm that, but with me, I've got nobody. There's a couple guys I think that took it personally, but for the most part, guys were very professional. And I ejected Bobby Cox for the record, which we went into Atlanta, I think in June, and someone said, "Oh, he only has to get ejected one more time for the record." So we came back in August, and I thought, I didn't even think anything about it. Certainly he'd been ejected since then for the record, but he hadn't. And I rang up Chipper Jones on a pitch, and Chipper was, pouting. And he went back to the dugout, and Bobby started yelling because he didn't want me, throwing Chipper out of the game. And I ejected him, and he came out between innings. I feel like I cheated the Atlanta people because this was a big buildup. They wanted the big over-the-top ejection tirade from Bobby Cox, and he was really quite calm about it. It happened between innings, so TV didn't pick it up. And, it just seemed like a calm discussion, and he left, and, they came back from commercial, and they said, well, apparently Bobby's been ejected, but it really didn't look like much of an argument. So anyway, if you're an Atlanta fan, I apologize for not making that as big a show as it should have been.
Shall I read some more from the chat? This is from Matt Kramer. Ted, thank you for being here tonight. What was your favorite ballpark to work in, and your least favorite?
So my favorites, I love, and I think I told Bill this, I love the old parks. That's why I like Fenway. I like Wrigley. I loved Old Tiger Stadium. I love the history of umpiring. So I felt like, man, I'm standing out here where Nestor Shylock umpired, Bill Clem umpired here, Babe Ruth played here. I just loved being that link to history. And having said that, I really, as far as like the parks I didn't like, this is going to sound very politically correct, but I tried to find something good in every park. Now I will say this, the Kingdom just didn't seem like a place that baseball should be played, and so, but the new park's great. Tampa, I struggle, Tampa doesn't seem like baseball should be played in there, but you get out in parks where it looks like baseball's supposed to be played, like Dodger Stadium just seems like, yeah, this was built for people to play baseball on. When I was in college, I would take the BART train up and go to the Oakland A's games. So I loved working there, especially when I first went to the big leagues. I think when they built Mount Davis out there, it kind of ruined it a little bit, but I loved the way it was open with the outfield and everything. Got to work the first game in San Francisco with Ed Montague, the first game at the new ballpark. He had sold concessions at Kezar, and then I think he umpired at Candlestick, and then he umpired the first game at Candlestick, and then umpired the first game at the new park. So that was cool to be with him, and for me to be a guy from the Bay Area. And I remember Kevin Elster hit 3 home runs the first game, and the Dodgers won, which is crazy because he probably didn't hit very many, didn't even hit double digits that year, I don't think. You guys would know that, but and then I worked my first playoff game there, and I worked an all-star game there. And then a lot of things with umpires, it's not just what is the ballpark like, it's what's the locker room like, what's the clubhouse guy like, what's the food like, and so Texas, to me, there's nothing like Texas barbecue and brisket, so I loved Dallas. And again, I had a soft spot for that place because it was my first big league game was in that stadium, and now I know I'm getting old because they built another stadium. But I like that. When I became older and became a crew chief, I liked the parks with the retractable roofs because we didn't have to worry about rain so much, and when it was nice, we could open it up. So I really appreciate when a stadium builds a place that they can open and close. Except Milwaukee, which can get kind of stuffy in there. Most of the places, they'll close up the roof and turn on the AC. In Milwaukee, I don't think they have that capability, so it gets a little bit it gets a little stuffy.
Ted, you sound like you're something of a student of the game or an appreciator of baseball history. I wonder if you could tell us from, you know, your personal perspective and your knowledge of umpires past and present, what are some of the more courageous things you think umpires have done in, you know, tough situations?
Yeah, you know, I think out of all the sports, getting to know the other officials, and this is no shot at them, but I think baseball umpires really try to stand up for the game and to do what's right, and what's right for the game, what's right for the situation. I think other sports sometimes can go into survival mode a little bit. And I think with umpires, you know, they don't care what the repercussions are. They don't care whether you like the call or not. They don't care whether the office is going to back it or not. You know, I think about the pine tar incident. Those guys did what was right by the rule book, and the commissioner decided to say, we're going to allow the protest anyway. You know, that was a courageous thing by the umpires to go by what the rule book says. I think every guy from all throughout the history of baseball, you would never see anyone throwing any kind of shade on the integrity of our guys. You know, one of the worst things that happened to the NBA was you had a guy that got involved in, you know, some gambling. That doesn't happen with our guys. You can rest assured that if there's a missed call out there or a misplay, it's because you know, because of error. Not every umpire I've ever worked with and every umpire I've ever heard of. And like you said, I love to talk to the old timers about how was this guy, how was that guy, and you know, we certainly have had our share of maybe not great people, but they were men of integrity when it came to baseball, and they felt like we feel like we're the protectors of the game. And so I think if that answers your question, I think they're courageous in the sense that they don't care about what people think about them. They care about protecting the integrity of baseball.
That was Tim McClellan who did the pine tar game. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And Joe Brinkman was the crew chief. Tim was the plate umpire. You had Drew Coble and the late Nick Bremigan. You know, all guys that I had the pleasure of working with and becoming friends with, other than Nick, who passed, you know, early on in my minor league career.
Do you know if they collaborated on that call or if that was Tim's call?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do you know if they collaborated on the call or if that was just a call?
Yeah, they collaborated on it. And Tim was the young guy on the crew. Nick was a rules expert. Nick taught rules at the Joe Brinkman's umpire school. And Nick was widely regarded as an expert in the rules. And so, you know, they made the call correctly from what the rule book says. But again, the commissioner at the time decided to uphold the protest. What's interesting in that, and talking to Davey Phillips and hearing that story, when they went back in to make that game up, Billy Martin, they had gotten word that Billy Martin had planned on appealing all 4 bases, and which is a genius move on Billy's part, because the crew there, they weren't there when Brett hit the home run and trotted around the bases. So how could they know if he touched the bases or not? So Billy thought he had them. Well, Davey Phillips then pulled out of his pocket a signed affidavit by all 4 umpires and what base they were working, you know, swearing that they had witnessed him touching the base. They said Billy almost choked on his chewing tobacco. They said it was one of the great scenes at the time. But then 2003, I was working second base in Wrigley. We were playing an interleague game with Tampa, and Sammy Sosa has a broken bat, and Tim McClellan was working the plate, and he called me down, being his 2-man, and then the rest of us, we gathered around, and we saw that Sammy had cork in that broken bat, and Tim looked at me and he said, "Here we go again." So I talked about me catching lightning in a bottle twice. He caught lightning in a bottle twice with being in the center of but that was less controversial. That was pretty cut and dried. I looked in the dugout. I saw Sammy looked like a kid who had his hand caught in a cookie jar. So yeah, he knew he had just gotten busted.
Thanks, Ted. I always thought you were very dependable and uncontroversial umpire.
Well, I appreciate that. It's I think all the umpires, nobody wants to be in the middle of controversy. It's no fun, but it's going to happen sometimes, and it's going to find you. Sometimes it finds more guys than others, but yeah, I appreciate the compliment. My goal was just to get back there, have a nice, clean, smooth game, and get out of there at a decent time, and get ready to do it again the next day. And for the most part, that's what it was.
This is from Walt Crush. Before umpiring merged, was it true that the NL umps called more low strikes and the AL called more high strikes?
Excellent question. There is some truth to that because the American League guys used the balloon, the outside protector. And the National League guys wore the inside protector. So there was some truth to that. However, this was happening in the late 90s. You'd still hear announcers saying that. The last umpire to wear an outside protector, I think it was grandfathered in. And so I think it was Jerry Neudecker, and Bill would probably know this, maybe in 1986. But anybody coming to the big leagues, I think in 1983 or before or after, had to go to the inside protector. And so really by the late 80s, everybody was wearing the inside protector and everybody was kind of setting up the same way. And so that was no longer valid. But it takes a long time in baseball to kind of, as people were still talking about that, I didn't think it was any longer true. But there was a difference in the way I believe the pitchers approached the strike zone. Having a hitter in the National League and then having probably your 7 and 8 hitters not being great hitters, but more defensive players. The National League guys attack the zone a lot more. 0-2 pitches, they'd go after a number 8 guy, number 7 guy. Where in the American League with a DH, your number 7 hitter is actually, that's a 6 hitter in the National League. And so they were pitching him a lot more carefully. They try to nibble at the strike zone a little more, I felt. After working both leagues, it seemed like the National League guys would challenge more with fastballs, where the American League pitchers were trying to go off speed. 0-2, they would nibble and try to get you to call it off the plate. Whereas in the National League, they were just going, okay, here it is, and throwing it to them. But so there was definitely a difference, but now I think it's indistinguishable.
I have a question from Gabe Schechter. Why is there no rule book definition of a check swing? There is little consistency in the calls made by base umpires.
Yeah, well, check swing is definitely the most difficult call that we have to make. You're 90 feet away, and for the base umpire, it's really hard. It's hard for the plate umpire too, because he's trying to watch a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, and you've got to track it all the way into the glove. So you're trying to block out everything else in your periphery, so it's tough to see what the bat's doing. Of course, there's times where it becomes obvious, or the pitch is in the dirt, or the pitch is really high, where you can kind of take your eyes and not follow it so intently because it's going to be a ball. But as a base umpire, that's the concentration you have to have on every pitch and anticipating a check swing, and going with dark bats. And games where the plate area is not lit as well. And it was a lot different when I was 23 years old standing out on a night game than when I was 57 years old standing out there in a night game. The eyes aren't as sharp. So you're really just trying to do the best you can, see where the head of the bat comes. One thing we have done, I think, in the last couple of years, have gotten more on the same page as umpires of what we're looking for. But yeah, it is really difficult. I actually think, it can't be done, but if there was a way that you could even replay a check swing where you can kind of slow it down and see where the bat ends up. But if you start replaying everything, it's going to take forever. And I look at the older games when they show them sometimes on the TV networks that you'll see a game from the 60s and 70s, and there's guys that their bats are coming across almost full swings, and they're not asking for help on check swings. So I think with the way the TV cameras and replay got so good that the umpires started having to call check swings more frequently. But yeah, and there is no rule book definition. If there was, it could be it could make things easier on the umpires.
Another question from David Alvarez. Your thoughts on computer umpires at the plate?
Well, it's there'd be good and bad to that. Just like with replay, I think there was great things that happened in replay. We all remember the Jim Joyce call at first base when Armando Galarraga had his perfect game going. We remember Don Dinkinger had a misplay in the '85 World Series. And so there's the Dinkinger play, there's the Joyce play. And thank God I got out of my career without having a Ted Barrett play. And you've got replay, which was kind of a safety net for us. Last thing we'd want to have happen is to miss a call in a huge situation and not be able to have it corrected. And so replay helps that. But we all see that you correct one problem, you create another one. Now you've got guys sliding into second base and losing contact with the bag for a split second with a glove on him with a tag, and replay overturns that to an out because you can't even see it with the human eye. Well, you would never even have thought about calling that out before replay. Matter of fact, guys they just swipe the tag down and they wouldn't hold the glove on them like they do now. So it's changed the approach of how you slide into a base. It's actually changed what safe and out is at first base. It used to be you'd listen for the pop of the glove and you'd see the foot touch the bag. And, if the runner didn't beat the guy to the base, he was out. But now you've got, you actually have sound. It takes a matter of time to travel from the ball hitting the glove to your ear. So you're actually, instead of calling on sound now, the replay is there's no sound involved. It's freezing it at what point. And so if we go back in time, there's a whole lot of outs that were safes and a whole lot of safes that were outs. And you watch Ricky Henderson the year he was stealing all those bases, he was breaking contact with the bag all the time, but he was beating the throw and he was safe. He would have lost a ton of those. So, you can make changes, but you're going to change the game drastically. And now you start talking about bringing in an electronic strike zone, which I don't feel that the technology is there yet. It's tough for them to get the height in real time. When we get evaluated, they come back the next day after adjusting it. It's still a person drawing the lines, determining what was high and what was low. There's still and they're getting better at the inside and outside tracking, but there's still a small margin of error there. So you're never going to achieve perfection. But if they can get it dialed into, and we all know technology moves quickly. I still don't believe it's there yet, but they can get it to where things are called the same. And so you'll have that. They'll still need umpires to have a fair foul, safe out, ball hitting everything else that we do. There's advantages too, because umpire performance, we travel, the people knew what we did to get to a game on some travel days, they'd be amazed. And now we got up out of bed at 4 o'clock to make a flight. And now we're standing on the field at 7 o'clock, concentrating really hard, try to be perfect. It would make the umpire's job easier, certainly, but it would change the dynamic of the game. And so I'm against it, but if they go to it, it's not like I'm going to quit watching baseball. I'm against all change, by the way. I'm just a purist, but you know what? A lot of the rules that they come up with, they end up being pretty good. I didn't want them expanding the wild card field. I didn't want them, going from 5 games to 7 games. And yeah, so but they don't ask me, and that's fine. I just kind of did what I was told, and the changes all worked out pretty good. And it looks like these changes are going to work out okay for pace of game, and they'll keep evolving and tweaking it. So, there's people making decisions that know what they're doing.
We all know, or we should know, that the box they show on TV is not the actual strike zone there.
Yeah.
Is the replay center in New York, do they have a better view of that?
No, because we're just getting the network feeds
Uh-huh.
on those. And a lot of times so here's the maddening part. Think about this. If you were a home plate umpire, you go out there, you're calling the game, and you're calling this 3-dimensional zone, and they're putting it up on a 2-dimensional screen. They're putting a box up, and then they're sending out data. MLB releases data, as you guys know, as to locations of pitches and whether it was a ball or a strike. And then we receive our evaluation the next day, and you've got 3 different things going on. You've got 3 different scores. As a matter of fact, if you look at what Pat Hoberg last year in the perfect game, had a game where they said he missed no pitches, which he's a phenomenal umpire. But if you look at the box, he missed 7 pitches. And then if you look at the score he received as an evaluation, that was he was 100% on his evaluation. But so you've got 3 different measuring systems that you're being evaluated on, at least by the public. And there's simply 2 of them aren't true, or maybe they all aren't true. Which one's true? Which ones do you trust? And the umpire's told, just worry about the one you get from the league. Well, I guarantee those scores are a lot higher than the public facing stuff, because the guy's going in, the tech is going in and drawing lines and adjusting the score. So one of the biggest changes I saw in my career over the years was the way the balls were received. The older umpires would talk about Bob Boone, what a great receiver he was. And, for me, it was a lot of great catchers, but now the catchers want to yank pitches. And when I came up, they said, if you yank a pitch, ball it. If he yanks it, ball it, because he's telling you that he thought it was outside and he tried to yank it back in, or he thought it was low and he tried to jerk it up. So ball it. Well, that's what we did. But eventually we started not scoring so well because they're actually were yanking pitches that were strikes. So really what the umpire has to do now is just ignore what the catcher's doing. So you think people say, oh, look, he's stealing a strike. No, really what he's doing is he wants to tell that catcher, just catch it. But people are coaching him, and I've had great catchers that I enjoyed working behind. You show up in spring training, and now they're jerking the ball, or they're getting down on their knee, and it's like, what are you doing? He said, well, this is the way I'm being taught and being coached, and I have to do this. And I go to there's some managers that used to catch, like Bob Melvin. I said, Bob, what are you doing? He says, I know this is what our people think is better. And I'm like, well, it's not helping. It's making me guess on whether, if you catch a pitch and stick it, I got a pretty good opportunity of knowing if that was a ball or a strike. If you're jerking it, you're now making me guess where that, where across the plate and where across the batter. And I'm not real good at guessing. I'd rather have an educated guess. I know it's 50-50, but anyway, I would really love to see them getting back to the way catchers used to catch the ball, just by sticking it. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I think the trend, as I watch games, I think the trend's starting to go the other way.
Oh, that's a good point there.
I see Jack Kane's joined us, and my first year in professional baseball was 1989 in the Northwest League, and Jack was the league president, and he was kind enough when we were in Bend, Oregon, to take my partner and I to lunch, and I was driving my dad's van, and Jack taught me about umpiring. He taught me about being a professional, but one of the best things Jack taught me was how to parallel park. And so he showed me, and I got out of the van, and I was able to do that. Now, whenever I parallel park in a tight spot, and I always remember my league president, Jack Kane, who taught me.
Jack, you're muted. You're muted.
You're on mute, Jack. We didn't catch that, Jack. I think you're on mute.
There we go.
No.
No, no, unmute.
How about now?
Yeah,
There you go.
Okay. Hey, Ted, are you doing any training at umpire schools or anything like that?
I'm going to teach some camps, the MLB camps that baseball puts on. The first one will be later this month in Cincinnati, and then May, Chicago. I think we go to Houston, and I'm gonna do those. I think they have 5 this year,
Good.
and so I'm gonna do some training there. That'll be fun. I like working with the young guys. I'll probably try to get through and visit the guys in the California League, and of course here in Arizona, I'll get out and watch them. And then I'm doing chapel for the umpires, and I went Easter Sunday. I was able to go over to the Diamondbacks and do chapel for those guys, and so I'll be able to do that with the big league guys and the young guys too. So I'll be around the ballparks.
You know, when I don't know, it's probably 15 years ago when they said that the chapel leaders could not go in the locker room, and my office happened to be right next to the umpire's room, so they just went around, left the umpire's room, came into my office. We had chapel.
Well, God will always find a way in baseball.
Ted, who were some of the more pleasant or fun guys as catchers that you worked behind?
Oh gosh, so many of them. Yeah, I tell you, I really liked working behind a lot of them. I'll never forget my first major league game. It was Ron Karkovice with the White Sox and Mike Stanley with the Yankees. So I mean, they were always favorites of mine. And you know, there's not too many. You know, you're not going to hear me say too many bad things about many catchers. I'm trying to just remember you always remember when you're a younger guy, they test you and they can be unfair, but I always remember the guys that, you know, and the guys that were around a long time, like Stephen Vode and, you know, and Joe Girardi, and, you know, some of them became managers, right? Catchers become managers because they know the game, but just great individuals. A guy like Buster Posey was just a class individual, not very talkative, but, you know, very respectful. So someone like that sticks out. Other guys that just like to talk, and I picked up Spanish as I went. So, you know, thinking about talking to Salvador Perez and some of the others, just practicing my Spanish. You know, they would say, no, en español, papi. So they would make me speak Spanish, and you know, that was always great. I was able to go to Cuba doing some mission work and working with their umpires. So whenever I had a Cuban ball player, I'd always throw out the colloquialisms, and they would always be shocked at that. So yeah, I loved talking to the players. You know, with the way the pitch clock is now, they said that's kind of eliminated some of the conversations that you could have with base coaches. And I probably would have been the reason the catchers were violating it, because I would have been talking too much. But I really enjoyed. I was a guy that enjoyed talking with players, and you know, and I never was really awestruck. But being a football guy, you know, standing on the field with Bo Jackson was impressive. You know, that was one of those times where I was kind of like in the moment of, wow, this is really cool, you know. Because, and the other time that I was kind of like turned a little bit of a fan was in the All-Star game in 2001, I believe, or 2007 in San Francisco. I'm working with Bruce Fleming, who Bruce never remembered my name. So he said, hey, Willie Mays was coming around on the cart as he was going to be a part of the opening ceremonies. We're standing on the field, and Bruce said, hey, you go tell Willie I want to talk to him. So there's a golf cart bearing down on home plate, and I'm at the runway at home plate. And I go and stand in front of the cart. And I was so excited to work my first All-Star game, but this cart's not seeing me or slowing down. I thought, I'm going to get injured before I get a chance to work an All-Star game. Might end my career. Well, thank God they see me and they kind of slam on the brakes and stop. And there's Willie Mays. And so I stuck out my hand to shake his hand. And this might be in my imagination, but I'm pretty sure this happened. He said, "Hey, Ted, how you doing?" I'm like, "That's pretty cool." Willie Mays called me Ted. And then Bruce, of course, came over and started talking to him. And then we started the game late because, Bruce has a tendency to talk a lot. But that was a fan moment for me. That was pretty close. Hey, that's great. That's Willie Mays. The other time that I was really soaked in being on the field was the 2018 All-Star game. Now I got to be the crew chief and I was working home plate. And for those of you who were there, you remember they had every Medal of Honor winner that was alive was standing on the field, and I took the time to shake every one of their hands, and I was just I was in awe of that. And as I reached down, some of them to shake their hands, some of them, you're grabbing artificial limbs and things like that because it was because of their heroics in combat. So that was another time that I was like thankful that I could be. Have the job that I did and be out there and be a part of it. And also working with Tim McClellan, George Bush would come in. George would come in Houston, the older President Bush, and the younger President Bush would come in Texas, as you guys know, being a part of that organization. And he walked in one day and saw Tim McClellan and said, "Hey, Timmy, how you doing?" And he left. I said, "Man, President just called you Timmy." And a couple years later, he came in. I think I was doing the 2011 World Series, and he came in the locker room and he called me Teddy. And he's, "Teddy, how you been?" And I said, "That's pretty cool. President Bush called me Teddy." And, so that was another time where I thought, yeah, this is a pretty cool job. And I think did I read something that someone asked me about the baseballs behind me? Said I look like I have a collection. I don't know if you can see that back there, but a lot of people think I have a lot of autographs by players, but I don't. I have autographs by people that would throw out the first pitch, people that would sing the anthem. So it's really cool back there. I've got a lot of actors. Roger Staubach was throwing out the first pitch, the Cowboys one day. Chuck Mangione was playing the anthem in New York one day. I had him sign a ball. I think during the World Series they had Dirk Nowitzki. He said, "I've never signed a baseball." And I said, "Well, you got a lot of letters there, so you might have to sign 2 baseballs." But so that's a cool collection I have of baseballs that, and then I would always have my crew sign one. Special events and World Series and playoffs, I've got everyone. And then if I worked with an old time umpire, I would ask him to sign it because I said, you're pretty old and you might die someday. This ball might be worth something. So they.
When you just mentioned anthem singers, in this little jar right here, you can't see what's in there. You may have stepped on this. This is dirt from home plate at Wrigley Field in 2016.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my friends goes back there every year to sing national anthem, and he scooped up a handful of it for me because
that's a memorable game for me in 2016 when they won the NLCS. They beat the Dodgers, and I was working the plate for the clinching game, and the kid threw just a great game. I think he faced the minimum, at least 8 innings, and then the Chapman came in and finished it out. But you forget, you get jaded. You guys been around baseball for a long time, and you kind of get jaded. The job, especially as umpires, sometimes you feel like the fans beat you down, but you forget sometimes what this game means to people. So Tom was our clubhouse guy. In each city, we've got a guy that takes care of us, our umpire clubby. And Tom in Chicago was an older retired firefighter, wonderful man. And the game was over, and out of respect for me as a crew chief, he said, "Hey, can my sons come down?" I said, "Absolutely, bring your sons down." And they're standing on the field, and I'm within earshot of them, and they're crying. and they said, man, I wish Grandpa was here. So you think about the generations that the game connects, and here they were just emotional because Cubs fans, and here they are going to the World Series. And I thought, yeah, that's a great reminder for me of what this game means to people. And it wasn't just a job; it was a way to go out there and maintain order, so people could enjoy it for generations and years to come.
Good. It's been an hour. Do you have a little more time there? I have a few more questions piled up here. You okay?
Sure. Yeah, I'm unemployed now, so I'm good.
Good for you. Okay, I'm with you. Okay. So let's see. Did you catch any pitchers doctoring the ball? Did you suspect it beforehand?
Yeah, there was the game was kind of getting out of hand with people. There would be pine tar. I'd see it on infielders' mitts. You'd see it on catchers. I think it was just one of those things where, as umpires, we wouldn't really, unless we were finding it on the ball, we really wouldn't address it. And I don't think the managers were, they didn't want to bring it up because of what was going on with their guys. And once in a while, there was some backroom stuff going on where they would use us kind of as intermediaries. A manager might come over to the locker room and say, hey, we think this guy's getting out of hand. Can you get word over to their side? And we would, and again, I think as cameras gotten in technology they would start catching it in pitchers' gloves. Before we started inspecting gloves, I'm standing behind home plate. I can't see into a pitcher's glove. If we saw a guy maybe going to his belt a lot or some discoloration, then we would address it, or certainly the manager would address it and we'd check them. But, it was kind of bizarre when we started checking the guy's gloves, but it ended up being a good thing. I enjoyed it because, like I said, I'd talk to a first baseman, a third baseman, a catcher, second baseman sometimes, an outfielder running by. I would never talk to relief pitchers because they're always coming in the game and they're getting ready to throw. So when we started checking gloves, it was kind of cool because now we're making a human connection with a guy, looking at it, say, hey, how you doing? Doing well. Okay, thank you. Move on. And I think that really helped player-umpire relationships a little bit by checking the gloves. And once we started checking, I never came across anything, even feeling their fingers. But with rosin and with sweat, it can get really, really sticky. We would experiment it within the locker room, and you can really get a tacky substance on that. So, they're going to find ways to cheat. I really didn't see it much. We would see scuffed balls. That's another thing that really changed in my career. When I first came up, if a pitcher was getting guys out with a baseball, you almost had to wrestle it away from him. If a ball went in the dirt, he did not want you checking it. He was grabbing it. Let's go. Ground ball to the first baseman. They throw it around, throw it to pitcher. He's on the mound. Hold on, I got to check it. No, it's okay. Now people would ask me, why do you guys throw away so many baseballs? The umpire is not throwing a baseball away. It is the pitcher doesn't want it. If it has any kind of scuff on it, the catcher will throw it away because he knows that the pitcher is going to want a new one. And sometimes they would do it just out of habit, a fly ball. Ball never hit the ground. They're asking for a new one. I don't understand why. I asked the pitcher once, I said, man, don't you want this ball? And he said, I wouldn't know what to do with it. So the old timers would take the scuffs, they would take them and they would use them to their advantage, making balls move. And I just think the new guys, maybe it's a good thing they didn't learn to cheat in that way. They found other ways to do it. But don't blame the umpire when you see him going through tons of baseballs. He's just being accommodating to the pitchers.
I have a question. Can you shed any light on how they set umpire schedules for the season? Do you have any say around the crews you get assigned to, or put in requests to be in certain cities at certain times?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, the crew makeup, the crew chief will submit a list of names of guys he wants. And from there, they try to take into account experience, service time. They try to accommodate a crew chief's requests for who he wants to work with. And then once they establish the crew, there's 19 crews. There's 76 guys, so there's 19 crews. And then it is set up by crew chief seniority. The most senior crew chief will be number 1, and the newest guy will be 19. And they will bid the schedules based on their seniority. The computer will make out 19 schedules, and they try to make it where it's pretty much spread out evenly, where you don't see a team too much, where you're not going to a city too much, where your travel's not too bad. And from there, but there's a lot to it, as you guys know, trying to figure out, make 19 different schedules and make them good schedules. So the crew chief is the one that picks it. I always look for input. Most of the good crew chiefs do. I try to take into account where my guys live. If I've got a guy, from Houston, I'll try to pick a schedule where we go to Houston a couple times. Of course, living in Arizona, I wanted to go there a couple times. I worked with Lance Barksdale for many years. He's in Mississippi. There was just nothing close for him. Atlanta maybe, or Texas. So just try to, and we also, there's always 15 crews working. So there's 2 crews in replay and there's 2 crews on vacation. I tried to pick the schedule that had good vacation times. I never liked being off the first week. I didn't need a vacation then. And also I liked getting vacations for my guys that had kids when their kids are out of school, so they could, there's nothing worse than going home on vacation and your kids are at school Monday through Friday. So there's so many factors that went into it, and there's no perfect schedule. You just try to pick the best one out there and run it out.
Did you umpire any of the farewell games of future Hall of Famers?
Oh man, I think I did a lot. I remember being in Detroit, and Alan Trammell brought out the lineup cards and he said, "This is my last game." And he got teary-eyed. Was just with got mutual friends with Buster Posey, and I was thinking about, I think his last game was the game he lost in the playoffs to the Dodgers. I think I go through the list. A lot of debuts. One thing I like to do, I know this is getting off track of your question, but if a guy was making his major league debut, a pitcher especially, I would sign the lineup cards, have the crew sign the lineup cards and give it to the guy, or send it over to the clubhouse to give it to the guy. And I got so many comments from guys that appreciate it. Even after I retired and guys were reaching out, people would say, "Oh man, I remember you gave me the lineup cards for my debut. Blake Snell mentioned it the other day. Another guy that I ran, Eli Whiteside, remember him? He was a bullpen catcher for the Giants. He said, "Hey, remember when I made my debut and you gave me the lineup cards?" And I'm thinking, man, that was a long time ago. But little things like that. I always enjoyed I remember when I came up, and I remember the veteran guys, the Kirby Puckett's, that took an extra minute to be kind to me, "Hey kid, congratulations. Hey kid, where are you from?" And so I always wanted to do that at the end of my career. When I saw, in spring training, I would talk to a young guy. "Hey, where are you from? Good luck. Have a good season. I hope you make the club," those type of things, and try to make a debut special. And when a guy, if it was his last game closing out Hall of Fame career, I always tried to go over and say hi. I remember Paul Konerko got a nice ovation in his last home game, and after the game, I sought him out and just said hi. We did that quite a bit as a crew, just to it's good for you always appreciate the guys that were classy and respectful, and we fight like cats and dogs sometimes on the field, but at the end of the day, it's like, that's a job and we can be friends. We always liken it to the old Wile E. Coyote cartoon, where the sheepdog comes in and they punch the clock, and then they go out and battle, and then they punch the clock and they go home and they say, "Hey, good night, Fred. Have a good night. See you tomorrow." I don't know if you guys remember that, but that's kind of the way we look at it with player and umpire relationships.
Do you have any plans to do a book about your career and life experience?
Man, I've had a lot of people approach me on it. I don't know. Right now, my answer is no, just because, I think there's a lot of great umpires written books, and I don't know if they need one more, but maybe Bill will write it. He did a nice job on the SABR book. So
What do you
he's
think is
probably not
the best umpire book?
What's that?
What do you think has written the best umpire book?
I thought Ken Kaiser's book was really funny. Kenny was a funny guy, and of course Luciano's the first one was great because the first one's always the funniest because he took all the good stories. But I read them all. I liked them all. Standing the Gaff. I really like that one. The Steamboat Johnson, again, with the history, going back to the old guys. I mean, every time we think we have things, we all think we have things bad when we work, right? Or we complain about it. But I mean, you read about Steamboat Johnson. He was in the minor leagues like 30 years. He talks about, taking the streetcar to work, and staying at a hotel, where there's no bathroom. The bathroom's down the hall. So I like reading about things where I came from and how bad the conditions were and how good we have it now. But yeah, Durwood had a good book. I was with him the year that he was writing it, and his author, drawing a blank right now, but he also wrote Junction Boys about Bear Bryant and forget. David Fisher's co-written a lot of those with, and Al Clark's book is good. Davy Phillips, just lots of good stories, and sheds a little light on the personal life of the guys. And so, yeah, I guess never say never, but right now I'm saying no to a book. I told Kaiser there should be a rule that you read a book before you actually write one. I don't know if he did that, but I loved Kenny a lot. He was up in the area, so the Western New York. I always had a heart. I can honestly say I loved all the guys that I worked with. The old timers were just characters. They were, a lot of them were Vietnam veterans, and they. And again, the fact that the guys that I came up with that had worked in the 60s worked with guys from the 40s, and worked with Nestor Shylock and some of the old timers. So I loved hearing the stories. I feel like I have a connection to those guys that had passed away before I even got to the big leagues, but I've got the connection. Working with Ed Montague, he would tell stories about Lee Wire, who was his best friend, and I never got to meet Lee, but the stories are just amazing. And working with Don Denkinger and Larry Barnett came up in 1969. So, they worked with all the old great umpires from the 50s. And, maybe someday now there'll be a young kid telling stories about Ted Barrett.
I believe you were one of 19 umpires that retired this last year. Is that right?
No, there was 10 of us.
10?
Yeah, which was the largest number.
Yeah.
Since the 99 resignation strategy. But yeah, there was 10 of us, and it was kind of a perfect storm. A lot of guys had been battling injuries for a long time. Jim Reynolds and Bill Welch battling concussions, and it just wasn't safe to continue working. And of course, Tom Hallion getting older, and again, I kind of, with me, it was an opportunity to retire while I was still relatively healthy, and other things I'd like to do with my life and travel. And so, yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And you still got quite a few guys that are, could retire in the next year or two, that are older. And but one thing, you got the young guys that are coming up. They're great umpires. The game won't miss a beat. they'll jump right in and take it to another level. They've got better training than we did. They're it's a young man's game too. Better to be have 35-year-old eyes and legs and ears than 60-year-old eyes and legs and ears.
This is sort of a weird question, so if you feel you can't answer this, I would understand. But you mentioned Nestor Shylock a couple of times. Al Barlick's in the Hall of Fame. What makes a Hall of Fame umpire?
Well, that's a good question. And the Hall guys, a lot of times they go in posthumously because it happens later. Jim Evans telling the story. Someone asked him if he was going to go to the Hall of Fame, and he said if he did, it would probably be posthumously. And the guy said, "Boy, I look forward to that day." So that was, yeah, I don't know. I remember when Nestor was up for consideration, and meant a lot to his family. Obviously, he was long gone. Doug Harvey and Al Barlick were able to go in before they passed, which was really cool. But who knows? What's the if you go on statistics such as games worked, events, things like that, you got to put Joe West in, right? But Jerry Davis and guys, Bruce Fleming, these guys have worked a lot of games and achieved a lot. But there's guys in the Hall of Fame that didn't work a lot of games. So I don't know what the criteria would be, but to me, that would just be, for myself, that's not something I would dream of. Anything like that would even come into consideration. It would be icing on the cake of a great career. But it's that's not something I think that would. There's other guys I think that should be considered, and there'll be guys that retire pretty soon here that should have some consideration too. But I think, what is there, 11 guys? There's 11, Bill, that are in the Hall of Fame now.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think so. So, and you know what? Joe West actually tracked down how many Major League umpires there actually have been. If you don't count the guys that worked, the replacement type stuff that only worked a few games, there's less than, I think, somewhere around 400 guys in the 150 years of baseball, which is crazy to me. Of full-time guys, not the fill-in guys that we've had. So, yeah, and to think about to be a part of such a rich history of baseball, and to have been on the field for some of that, it's really cool to me.
I remember one time I was in the umpire's room at Fenway Park, and I counted the pictures on the wall, and there was one guy missing. And so I mentioned it to Chris Cundiff, the umpire guy. And the next game, they had a photograph of him up on the wall.
Yes, and I'd like to tell this story too. We were in Oakland for a day game, and the great Ernie Harwell used to stop down to the locker room all the time. And Ernie was, this was toward the end of his career, end of his life, and he came in the locker room, and I was the only one there. And in the Oakland locker room, there was pictures of players on the wall around. And Ernie's looking at them, and he's telling me a story about each one of these guys. And then he asked me, he said, "Do you know why they're up here in your room?" And I was like, well, they were Philadelphia Athletics, they were Kansas City Athletics. And I thought, that's kind of a stupid question. This old guy's kind of losing it. And he looked at me and he said, every one of these players became Major League umpires. And I thought, wow, this guy is so sharp that he knew that off the top of his head. I mean, who knows that? It's crazy. So it made me go back and investigate and, try to research as much as I could on who played in the big leagues and who umpired. And the last one to do it, I think, was I'm getting old now, but anyway, it's been a while since the last player to play in the big leagues and then umpire in the big leagues. As soon as we hang up, I'll remember his name. But anyway, we have Laz Diaz is the only current guy. He actually played. Bill Kunkel, thank you. Thank you. Is that Gabriel? Bill Kunkel, that was it. Yes, I just saw that across my screen. Thank you. Laz Diaz played in the minor leagues with the Twins, and I think he's the only one right now on the staff that played professionally. So,
A few minutes ago, when you mentioned the young guys coming up to umpire when all you guys are retiring, and you mentioned the 35-year-old eyes and everything. When I was writing about umpires' equipment and uniform, one question, well, I had contact information of 4 umpires to, to talk to them about these things. One question that I had for the umpires, and the answer was crazy, was that what's the difference of the technology of the equipment from 30 years ago to now? But 30 years ago, if you got hit with a foul tip, you were 28. Now that you're 58, even with better equipment, it's going to hurt more.
that's right. Yeah. And they didn't throw as hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it still hurt when you got hit, but they didn't throw as hard. And, the Carlucci, the chest protector, as Bob was referring to, that I had, if this wasn't my last year, I think it would have certainly been that chest protector's last year, because the foam and the padding were starting to get a little bit thin. I started to feel some of the shots. Of course, that might have been due to my age, but I blame it on the chest protector. So, but Cecil Carlucci was a Pacific Coast League umpire that made the chest protectors, and he passed away in the 90s. So I was fortunate to be one of the last guys to have one, I think.
But you had a backup too, right?
I did. Yeah, I told you that story when I called Cecil and I said, I need another one. He said, this one should last you a while. And I said, no, but you're old. I don't know how much longer you're going to be around, which, I don't think he found very funny, but again, it was true. So I had a backup that I only wore one spring training game. But so now if I don't enter the Hall of Fame, that's not a problem. But I think maybe the chest protector should be displayed there just from the perfect games that it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to finish up a few questions here.
Okay.
From people, let's see here. Is being a big league umpire a harder career path today than it was in 1989?
Well, there's more jobs now because of replay. And so now it's just the timing of it. If I think the guys that are in AAA now, certainly the guys who were in AAA last year, they were able to get jobs. And for those of you guys that don't know, if you're in AAA a few years, you'll eventually time out. So you can theoretically be the best umpire ever born, and you may not end up being a major league umpire just because of the timing of it. So I think it's going to be tough once you have the next turnover in the next couple of years of older guys. Now you're going to have a young staff. It's going to be a lot of guys just going through AAA and timing out. But I certainly think, man, we have the conveniences, the travel's tough, but it's better than it was in taking the train in the 50s. We've got, our locker rooms are great. We've got people taking care of us. We've got guys taking care of us on the field with hydration and everything else, and everything that, living in the modern era is great, air conditioning and things like that. But man, the scrutiny, the media pressure, the way they break down every decision, the second and third guessing, the talk shows, it used to be you just tried to stay out of the newspaper. And now it's, every local talk show is trying to fill their time with content, and everybody loves the controversy. And so everybody loves to, if I said the name Angel Hernandez, you guys all know that name. But Angel's, he's a very nice guy, but he's just a lightning rod. And so, that's the era we live in, right? Every mistake he made is plastered across the country and across the media outlets. So yeah, it's a good job, but it can be tough that way too.
I think we just have time for one last question. I'll ask this one. Is there a difference between the Brinkman and the Wendelstadt umpiring schools?
There, Wendelstadt was a National League umpire and Joe was an American League umpire, so there were some differences. But for those of you that may not know this, as of last year, there's no more umpire school. Now the camps that like the ones I'll be teaching, guys will get invited from there to the facility down in Vero. So it's invite only. There's no more like open enrollment. You have an open enrollment to go to the camp, but then you have to get selected out of the camp to go to Vero, where then you'll be instructed in the course and placed into the minor league. So this is the first year of it. The guys entering the rookie ball leagues, the complex leagues, came through this new Vero school. So and I guess Wendelstedt did operate a school this year. He had a limited number of guys sent to this program, but it's the face of the game is changing. There's a lot of recruitment. They want to get diversity. They want the candidates. They want to be able to handpick them. So the face of the game will definitely be changing in the next few years. But my time at umpire school was a lot of fun. Everybody that goes, it's a good time. It's like boot camp. It's like boot camp, fantasy camp, umpire camp, all rolled into one, and it's a lot of fun. It beat getting punched in the head by George Foreman, and so I loved my time at school. I'm reading the comments here. Oh, someone said, what does timing out mean? Yeah, meaning eventually, if you're say you're in AAA for 3, 4, 5 years, and you haven't got pulled up to get a look in the big leagues, either with spring training or filling in on a vacation, you'll be released because they have to make room for the guys at the lower levels to come up. And I see someone else was, answering that question. So thank you.
Ted, you might mention what you did before you started umpiring. When you mentioned George Foreman, reminded me of what you one of the jobs that you did.
Yeah, the sparring partner job.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a way to make some money. And again, I was a better punching bag than I was. I could take a punch. I learned the etiquette of sparring, and there was a lack of heavyweight. Not many people wanted to spar with Mike Tyson, and I don't blame them. That you can't make that. You can't pay a guy enough to do that. I got to work with Evander Holyfield and Razor Ruddock and some other great guys. So it was fun. Some days were funner than others.
I got to tell this real quick story in Spokane during the playoffs one year, '89. You had the plate, and you were back in the umpire's room. You were back in the corner shadow boxing. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, that's how I warm up." You're not going to go out and hit somebody, are you, Ted?
Yeah, that's how I got locked in for the game, shadow boxing and getting ready. I'll tell a quick story on Jack Kane. I know I'm going long, but they played an alumni game in Bend, and Jack worked the plate, and we showed up, and he said, "Hey, I wore your plate coat." It was about 105 in Bend. I don't know why Jack went out and wore the coat, but it was worked pretty hard that day, sweating. So, and I thought all my league presidents were going to be like Jack Kane, someone who officiated, knew how to umpire. Jack was still working football at the time, and he knew what we went through, and he was a big support. And so I got spoiled in my first year, because after that,
Cal,
yeah, they didn't understand umpiring so much.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no more questions or comments, I think we'll take a look at the time here and call it a night here. Any further questions or comments? Ted, we can't thank you enough. Okay, it's been pure pleasure. Okay.
Well, it was fun. Thanks, guys.
Okay, yeah.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Bob, you have anything else you want to add?
Nope. But
Good night, everybody.
much Ted for joining us.
Thank you guys. God bless you guys.
Okay. Thanks a lot. So long, folks.